Okay, excellent. This is Josh Hollander, host of the Insurtech Leadership Podcast, and I'm pleased today to be joined by Jake Cash. He is the founder and CEO of Senryx Group. Senryx helps property and casualty insurance agencies build marketing systems they actually own, so their growth doesn't depend on a vendor, a carrier, or the next batch of purchase leads. This conversation matters right now because the hard market that punished agencies for leaning on their carriers is starting to ease, and owners have to decide whether to keep building their own growth engine or slide back into renting it. Jake spent years running national agency marketing at GEICO, where he managed more than $500 million in ad spend. He has since helped over 300 agencies build what he calls marketing independence. Welcome, Jake.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Looking forward to the conversation today.
Absolutely. So, any gaps you'd like to fill in on that intro before we kind of dive into things in more detail?
I think you hit on it better than I could, to be honest. So props to you. Happy to kind of touch on maybe some of how I came from GEICO to Senryx. But other than that, I think you did a great job. So appreciate it.
Sure, yeah, that'd be great. It'd be interesting to hear the origin story.
Awesome. Yeah. So like you said, spent, 5.5 years inside of GEICO's kind of marketing machine, and that scale and managing all of that ad spend and partnerships with NBA teams, MLB teams, negotiations with Meta, Google, et cetera, really gave me the ability to see things at scale at a 10,000 foot view and see the trends of what led some insurance agencies to thrive from those that don't. So, had the opportunity to lead marketing strategy for over 300 agencies across the country at the time. And the fastest growing ones were, of course, always the ones that caught our attention and made us look twice, right? And obviously fast growth is awesome. And what we always noticed was that agency was kind of riding one growth channel more than others at the time. And that's great. I mean, you want to lean into what's working more than what's not, of course. But what we tended to see was some of those really fast growing agencies actually were kind of riding a wave of ups and downs at the time because they were so dependent on that one growth lever. And it kind of blinded them from being able to diversify and have less ebbs and flows and more of a straight up arrow long term. Right. And so that was the main thing that I continued to see at my time at GEICO with the agencies that we worked with. And what separated the ones that were in kind of the top 10% from those that continued to ride that wave was diversification in growth and not being so dependent on one channel. And perhaps that top producer that's growing the business leaves for a competitor, or your lead vendor quality tanks overnight and it has an outsized impact on your agency. So fixing that whack-a-mole cycle is really what charged me to found Senryx and is what we've been up to for the last couple of years here.
So when you look at an agency's marketing for the first time, is that overdependence on one growth lever, the sign that they don't actually own their growth, or are there other sort of tells that they're just kind of riding the wave, as you said, versus really owning their own destiny, controlling their own destiny?
Great question. It's kind of dependent, right? So we break down marketing independence into 5 different buckets. We touched on a couple in that first kind of back and forth, but it would be carrier dependency, channel dependency, dependency on a specific marketing tactic or platform, like a social media platform, for example. And the others would be people dependency as well. And vendor dependency would be the final one. So depending on where an agency's at in their life cycle, we tend to run kind of a diagnostic to figure out where they're at, where they want to be, and then continue to kind of step up the step ladder of independence over time, because it doesn't happen overnight.
Got it. And where do you draw the lines between marketing and sales, or marketing and account management?
Yeah, it's pretty blurry, right? And that's a tale as old as time in different organizations. So a lot of times we start in kind of the marketing realm, but we end up touching different parts of the business because they all work together, right? A lot of times, if an agency comes to us and says, "Hey, I just need more leads into the system," we'll kind of take a look under the hood, and all of a sudden we'll realize, actually, your lead quantity is potentially there, but your systems to actually follow up with them and convert them into new business might not be. So it's kind of an ever-growing question that we're constantly tackling, and I don't think you can really silo them off, right? The best organizations have all of their kind of different levers of the business working together in a really, really collaborative way.
And I mean, what happens when someone says, well, you were at GEICO, everybody knows the get-go, you had 500 million to play with, how's this relatable to me and, my agency?
Yeah, it's obviously a completely different ecosystem when you're in a kind of a captive carrier model than an independent agency model, right? So we get that question quite often. And what I would say is you have to lean into your strengths and your differentiators, right? So GEICO's strengths and differentiators is their deep pockets and the brand awareness that they've spent so many years and so much money to build. If you're an independent agency, you probably have different differentiators, which might be your speed to change, right? It might be your niche. It might be the team that you have and the retention that you have that's potentially better than a carrier because you're able to actually develop those relationships with your client base, right? And so anytime we work with an insurance agency, we always take a look at not just where you are right now and where you want to go, but also your strengths and your resources to get there and build a custom strategy based on that.
And is there sort of that lead mindset, or at one end of the spectrum, and then I only work by referral mindset at the other end of the spectrum that you're dealing with all the time?
Yeah, you named it. It tends to be those two kind of camps, right? And they tend to shout at each other as well. So usually it's big believers in the lead game and big believers in the referral game. And what we've done with a lot of the agencies we've worked with is kind of built out multi-pronged systems so that they're not so reliant on just one thing. You don't want to have a referral partner all of a sudden dry up and then your new business generation is just gone overnight, right? So it's funny that we all kind of come into our own tribes, and it's hard to get us out and see the pros and cons of how other people are doing it sometimes.
And how do you get people to see it as tangible? Because I think sometimes people view marketing as sort of, there's no direct line of sight with marketing to business. I think some people feel. How do you address that piece?
Yeah, I think there's a belief out there that that's the case because a lot of vendors in the marketing space aren't very forthcoming with the data that they have on the top of their fingers. And so one of the things that we've been really focused on is making sure that everything that we build for the agencies we work with is owned and operated by the agency first and foremost. So if they ever decide they want to work with somebody else down the road, it's their data they can take and run with. We see this a lot on the lead vendor side where it's kind of a black box of how those leads were generated. They don't really tell you anything about them. Sometimes they're being sold to 5, 7, 10 different agencies at the same time. And on the flip side, when you build, ad accounts, for example, or email campaigns or whatever it might be, you have a lot of access to your own data at that point. And it starts to kind of click in their mind like, oh, when I see more phone calls on my dashboard, it means my team's busy. And they kind of start to connect the dots because they actually have access to the data that's been hidden from them for quite some time.
So is there one thing that you focus on sort of trying to get agency owners to shift their mindset on about marketing? So how do you crack through?
Yeah, I think that to your point earlier, marketing is kind of this pie in the sky term that encompasses a lot of things. And so we try to get more tactical. Obviously you need to start with strategy, but from there you got to get into the tactics, and it doesn't have to be the agency owner, of course, that's going to be the one doing everything, but they need to have enough of an understanding that if we were to go away or their top producer were to go away, for example, they know enough about the system to plug somebody else in and continue to run it long term. So as far as kind of distilling that myth in marketing, I think most agencies that we work with like data. And once you can start to see the numbers associated with it, it starts to click and it starts to show in the growth of the agency as well. And that's when they become believers. Turns out, if you produce results, it's it starts to click in people's minds, right? So,
of course. And the systems, I mean, how does so you said they own it, but we're living in a world where, they've got agency management systems. They might have separate CRM systems. They, depending on who they work with, there may be, third-party systems that they're accessing as well. How do you sort of handle infrastructure in that environment? Is it bespoke in every case to each agency, or is there kind of a standard tech stack that most agencies should be running off of in a kind of overall organizational design that they should have to make this work?
Yeah, great question. I would say standard tech stack is always changing, because especially right now in the age of AI. So I don't love giving an answer to that, just because, I mean, we're seeing this leapfrog effect right now with technology just growing at such a fast rate that 1 month it might be this AMS system, the next month it might be a different one that all of a sudden has, a cloud connector built that just gives you different capabilities than were available in the industry at all 2 years ago, right? So I think it's more about making the systems connect to each other in the background is the biggest thing. If you have an AMS that doesn't work with your IVR system, for example, or, all of these different systems that aren't talking to each other, that's just going to make your life really difficult. And that's one of the things that we see the most, is that agencies are sitting on a decent amount of data, but the data is not speaking to itself and learning from itself across the organization very well. It's sitting in these silos and it's not being taken advantage of in the right way to where it actually allows you to make smarter decisions. So a lot of times we'll just do a diagnostic to learn what they're doing currently and try to continue using those tools if it's worthwhile, but make them smarter by helping them talk to each other.
So we've, on the executive search side, we've had one past client in particular that developed some predictive analytics technology so they could identify if someone was likely to shop their policy, identify, cross-sell opportunities, things like that. So I think you're kind of on the record to saying the fastest path to growth is usually through the book an agency already has. So is that by leveraging, technologies like that to kind of see the gold that's hidden already in the book, or does that mean something else?
Yeah, it's a little bit of both. So yes, to leveraging technologies you already have the access to, and getting in front of your current client base more frequently. I think the stat out there, I forget the source, but it's like 7 to 9 times cheaper to retain an existing client than to go out and get a new client, right? And so I think a lot of times we forget that as business owners. And one thing that we've seen as well is there are knock-on effects from doing different types of marketing. Like, for example, if you're going to post on social media, I'm not personally a huge social media guy, but some people are better at it than others and spend more time on it than others. And one thing we found is if you post more frequently on social media with educational or informational content to your audience, a lot of times your current client base is seeing that as well. And it reminds them that you exist. It reminds them that you're bringing value to the table, and it helps with retention, not just new business generation, but posting on social media can help with retention, for example, as well. That's just one example. There's also like email marketing by sending newsletters, for example, to your current client base as well. So it's really a multi-pronged approach in most cases. But I do think that everyone loves new business and wants to grow. And so you can't forget about that. But a lot of times there's kind of a secret pile of cash that's already sitting in your book business.
Yeah. So, you mentioned an agency owner, starting to see the phones light up and things like that. And you mentioned everyone loves data. But can you maybe give like a before and after example of an organization and kind of how you measured that the services you provided actually worked or are working?
Yeah, for sure. There was a agency we've been working with now for about 18 months or so. They came to us. They're in the state of Texas. They were writing about 100 policies a month, personal lines, P&C, and basically the agency owner was doing a lot of different jobs in the business, right? Wearing a bunch of different hats. It's a tale as old as time. He was getting tired of it, wanted to grow. And so we started, talking about what a strategy would look like for them to do that. Fast forward 18 months from now, with the different strategies that we've put into place, the agency's writing over 100 personal lines policies a month, over 800, starting at 100 18 months ago. And they're actually now opening up a second location, which they never would have thought that they were going to 18 months ago as well. So, things like running Google ads, things like email marketing to their current client base to continue to increase cross sells, for example. Things like running ads on Meta as well and posting organically on social media too, were really the tactics that took this agency to the next level. Those wouldn't be the same tactics that I would recommend to every agency, because you have to kind of take a strategy and make it custom for the niche that you're serving and your agency's strengths and weaknesses and resources. But in this case, that was kind of the mix that really made it go to the next level.
And is there additional budget that people have to find in order to make these strategies work, or are you typically moving, money around that they're already spending elsewhere and just getting them a better ROI on that?
Sometimes it's a mix of both, right? Again, kind of depends on the agency. What we typically do when someone comes to us asking for help is we start off with a diagnostic session that allows us to essentially feel each other out to see if it's going to be a good fit and do a shorter kind of sprint toward strategy. Essentially, we build out a strategy. We present it to the agency based on a lot of questions that we ask them to get to know the ins and outs of their business. And then they have the ability to decide if they want us to help them implement the strategy or if they want to try to run at it on their own or work with somebody else to do that. So I really like that way of doing business because it allows you to have some optionality on the next steps that you want to take, as opposed to having to get locked into like retainer hell, which I know a lot of marketing agencies out there kind of have golden handcuffs on you. So yeah, that's when we would kind of dig into what resources you have available and decide if additional budget's going to be needed, or if maybe, you have some staff that's got some downtime right now. That happens very very little. I know in most cases we're all strapped for time and money. So a lot of times it is trade-offs, right?
So it almost sounds like you're more like an agency business consultant and not just a marketing firm. I mean, is that an accurate statement, or am I overstating it?
Yep. I would say on the front end, we do a lot of consulting. On the back end, we also help with some done for you marketing services and retention services as well. So.
Got it.
Yeah.
And what is that, you're talking about people being able to kind of control things themselves. So, I mean, it sounds like you're trying to build a business for people to need you less. Is that how it plays out, or does it work differently? Exactly.
Yeah, we're trying to go by that. Give a man a fish and he eats for a day. Teach a man to fish and they feed for a lifetime. Right. That's kind of the model. So if we get to a point where they don't need us anymore, then we've done our job. And in some cases, that's a 6 to 12 month process to get an agency to that point where whatever system we came up with in conjunction with them is operating at a point where it's kind of smooth sailing and they're able to kind of take the reins themselves at that point. In other cases, like the case I gave you earlier about the agency who's basically 8x their business in 18 months, they don't have the time to do it themselves and they prefer to continue working with us, right? And so we like to give optionality on that front. But yes, our favorite part of our job is being able to say, you guys got it from here and reach out if you need anything in the future.
So you touched on AI very lightly, but it does effectively give you sort of 24/7 employees available. And so, people can generate lots of content. They can create responses to emails. They're, playing the game with Yelp reviews or whatever else is out there, trying to respond to that stuff. Is it really helpful, or does it just kind of generate AI slop that, maybe increases volume, but doesn't really increase value?
I think it's a little bit of both. And I'll couch this response by saying I'm not an AI expert. I'm trying to keep up with it as fast as everybody else is. It's basically a full-time job, right? Of course, we're using AI in our business. I think if you're not using AI in your business, then you got to get with the times to some degree, and you should at least be testing it, right? As far as what I've seen work the best so far with the agencies that we've worked with, I would say speeding up some of the repeatable administrative work in the background has been use case number one. On the marketing side specifically, that could be helping with like speed to lead, for example, to make sure that you're getting introduced to someone that wants your business as fast as possible, because data suggests that the first person to reach out has a much higher percentage chance of winning that business. Content, hit or miss, to be honest. I think it has to be done right. I think if all you're doing is putting in a 2-sentence prompt and copy and pasting and putting that on social media, it's just not worth the time and energy, because you're just getting the average of the internet as the reply, right? And it's not custom to you and your agency. If you're feeding data into whatever LLM you're using, Claude, ChatGPT, Gemini, et cetera, it's getting better. But I do still think that you need a human in the loop, and maybe it's getting 80% of the way there, and you need to get it over the finish line by adjusting it to sound like you, being in your brand voice, et cetera. One thing that we do have our eye on is the shifting buyer journey in insurance and how AI is shifting that. And specifically when it comes to like search, right? So obviously Google's dominated search for forever. Now there's Claude, ChatGPT, et cetera, that are doing search in a slightly different way. And one thing that we're testing already is running ads on ChatGPT, for example, for some of the agencies that we're working with. So very early days, it's still a beta product from ChatGPT, but as consumers continue to shift their habits, you need to be reaching them wherever they're spending their time, right? And they're spending more and more time in these LLMs.
And what about, I don't know, I've seen different acronyms, but like LLMO versus SEO?
Yeah. AEO, GEO, whatever alphabet soup you want to call it today, yeah. Right? Yeah, I think that it's too early for anybody to call themselves an expert in AI search, to be honest. And I think there's a lot of people out there that are claiming they're experts, and perhaps they're seeing really good results. Everything that I've seen is that kind of the basics of a really good SEO strategy is also going to be the basics of a good AI search strategy as well. And so, yes, maybe there's some tweaks here and there that can get you continued improvement and optimizations on the AI search front. But I think if you are already doing a good job at SEO, it's going to lend you well into this new space as well.
So what about, like, for you building this business? You went from a large organization, which I'm sure probably had some level of bureaucracy to it and other things, and now you're running a small business. What's that transition been like for you?
Yeah, my wife likes to remind me that I quit my Fortune 500 job the same day that she went back to work from maternity leave and that our daughter started daycare. So that's one of the fun days to look back on in our household. But I wouldn't trade it for the world. It's been the fastest learning curve that I've ever had in my life, right? Being able to be hands-on and learning how to build a business. Thankfully, I had a good amount of experience with helping business owners, helping insurance agencies, and I've been able to kind of get a look under the hood at what it looked like to be a business owner to some degree. Obviously, I'm not running an insurance agency, but running a service-based business as well, which relies on, human capital and things like that more than producing a trinket, right? And so that allowed me, I think, to have a quicker start. But it's a continued growth curve, and we're a few years into this thing, and thankfully, things continue to point in the right direction. We continue to grow, and there's always new problems with growth, but those are the right problems to have and the right problems to be solving in a business, right?
And do you apply the same approach to your own marketing that you're using for your agency clients, or is it different selling professional services?
Yeah, we definitely apply the same kind of philosophies as far as having a diversified marketing mix for ourselves as well. The tactics are different for us than I would recommend for some insurance agencies. For example, if you're going to operate a personal lines agency, that's more of a scale play, right? So I would equate our marketing strategy closer to like a more niche, commercial based P&C agency, probably, where it's more relationship driven. It's more thought leadership driven, things like that. Just trying to add value to your target audience and educate and be a go-to resource that people can ask questions of as they grow, right?
Yeah. So you gave the example of the 8X agency and the owner who is kind of working in the business, not working on the business. So how do you avoid that for yourself as you're growing?
Yeah, that's a constant battle. We're hiring pretty rapidly right now to try and solve for that, to be completely honest. So I think it's an unavoidable thing as you start out a new business, to be completely honest. And normally when we see the best time frame to kind of exit that, wearing all hats in the business is like around that $1 million annual recurring revenue mark for an insurance agency, that it just gets to a point where it's untenable. And it gets to a point where, you're not going to grow much higher, much faster, or much larger than that if you don't make that switch in mindset. So that's generally when we start talking to agencies that we're working with about needing to diversify and, getting out of the nitty gritty details in their business.
Is the way you hire within Senryx different both in terms of process and then also the type of people you look for versus when you were at GEICO? Sorry. Excuse me.
You're good. Yes and no. I honestly think, so I've probably haven't hired as many people as you have, obviously, in your career, Josh, since this is kind of your thing. But, I've hired probably 30 people over the last 10 years or so. And I've always seen the best success when it comes to hiring with people that just have a growth mindset. And a lot of times I think where I've seen hiring failures happen, if it's either me doing it or one of my peers that was doing it at GEICO, or even another, agency owner I've worked with and talking to them about it, is when they are really specific in the experience that's needed. And they're looking for like a really specific role that they don't think they're going to have to train that person at all. Whereas we've seen more success with almost trying to find someone that's just fresh and doesn't have much experience, and then we can train them exactly the way that we want to train them. I think that changes the more senior you get, obviously, right? Because there's prerequisites that are just necessary at that point. But yeah, that would be my takeaway on hiring, is hiring for kind of culture, personality, and growth mindset.
Yeah. No, I would agree with that. And particularly the smaller, the bigger the business, hopefully there's a clear culture and everyone in the organization understands that and how to hire for it. In a small business, you can't hide someone somewhere. So They have to be someone who, you're going to want to work with in the trenches every day. So whatever level they're at, whether they're higher level and they have to bring certain skills and experience to the table, or whether they're, more junior and you can train them up the way you want to do things. Either way, I think in a small organization, you really have to kind of get that fit piece right. And then I agree, we work with a lot of growth companies, and, if someone doesn't have that learning mindset, that growth mindset, then, it's never going to work in a startup organization. And I think in general these days, with the technology evolving so fast, I think if you don't have a growth mindset, to your point earlier, you better figure one out, because you're going to get left in the dust.
Absolutely.
So last question for me. So for any owners out there listening who maybe know they're dependent or know they need to make a change, what's the first thing you would tell them to do right now?
First thing I would ask is...
Besides call you.
Yeah, exactly. First thing I would ask is, do you know what % of your new business is coming from what you're putting your time and energy, your dollars into, right? Like, do you know that if you're big in the lead buying business, do you know that 80% of your new business is coming from leads that you're purchasing? Or if you're big in referrals, is 75% of your business coming from referrals, for example, right? You don't need to have an exact number to that, but if you don't know where you're getting new business from, then you're just flying blind. And if you do know where you're getting new business from, and all of a sudden that percentage is higher than 50, then that is starting to kind of set off a red alert flag for me that that's probably too much risk, honestly, and too much vulnerability to have in the business. Because what happens if, all of a sudden you're big in direct mail, for example, and you're getting all your business from direct mail, and postage costs continue to rise, and trash continues to get seen in people's mailboxes, and the ability of direct mail to be successful continues to go down, then your business is going down with it, if that's the only way you're getting business. And so diversifying the growth levers would be the number one thing I would be thinking about.
I mean, effectively, it's almost like portfolio theory for investments, but portfolio theory for agency revenue generation.
Exactly. And there's people like Elon Musk, who are obviously the richest people in the world, that are heavily invested in companies that they run and maybe not super diversified. And that's a way to go. But the ticker on his wealth probably goes up a little bit more, up and down a little bit more on a daily basis than Warren Buffett, maybe, who's really diversified in Berkshire Hathaway. So I think there's always different ways to do it. But depends on if you want to really go for growth and also have that downside capability, or if you want to have a little bit more stable and long-term play and sustainable play.
Well, Jake, it's been a pleasure having you on. Anything else before we wrap up that you'd like to share or comment on?
Yeah, I appreciate the opportunity, Josh. I think the only other thing would be, if people enjoyed the conversation today and want to get more information, you can head on over to our website. That's senryx.com/podcast. We have a few different resources there that you can take advantage of. One being a free assessment on your marketing independence, and it takes about 2 minutes to complete. And people are typically surprised by what they find. But that's senryx.com/podcast. And then I'm happy to connect and just be a resource. I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. If you search me there, it's Jake Cash, just like the money.
All right, sounds good. And we'll have all that in the show notes when the episodes go up on YouTube and Apple and Spotify and all that stuff.
Great.
So Jake Cash, founder and CEO of Senryx Group, thanks so much for joining me on the Insurtech Leadership Podcast.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Really appreciate it.